Hey, it's Scott Lips, and welcome back to yet another episode of Spin Magazine's Lip Service. This is the year in review 2022. I'm joined today, my friend, the music editor of Spin Magazine, Daniel Kohn.
How's it going, dude?
It's going all right, buddy. We had a great interview last time with the boys in Palaye Royale.
Oh, yeah.
Very successful, very fun. So I'm excited to chop it up. We're just going to get into like our favorite things this year, Daniel, our favorite interviews, our favorite music. It's interesting, the way that we consume music these days, it's so much different than we used to. I mean, I only consume music really kind of in the single format, and I really don't listen to full records that much. So when putting together these lists, it's always challenging for me.
So why is that, though? Is it just convenience, or?
I'm part of that TikTok generation, I guess. I
There you
consume
go.
everything in like 10-second intervals. But really, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, when I was going through my list and reviewing everything, I was even thinking about some of the bands. And one of the first bands I do want to speak about, who I think had a stellar year, was Maneskin. But, if you even think about their year, and I was going back and reviewing everything, they didn't even release a record this year. It's all been singles.
But SNL, look, they were on SNL in January. They played every major festival. They took the momentum that they were building from last year and kicked through the door.
They did. And I love the fact that they look like a real rock band, because when we had our friends in here the other day from Palaye Royale, I just thought to myself, this is the era I grew up in when bands look like bands. And you and I spoke about riffing about, the Guns N' Roses records and, Use Your Illusion, the B-sides. And so, that is an era when everyone looked like rock and roll bands. I think there's a little bit of a move towards bands really looking like rock and roll bands this year with those guys. And obviously there's a bunch of other bands that are happening this year, like a band called Beauty School Dropouts. Obviously the Struts are from a few years ago. We had them on the show not long ago, but there's a whole movement.
And
in
don't
rock
forget,
now.
he played at your birthday.
He did, and that was we're going to talk about that. One of my favorite gigs this year. But let's get into a little bit. I mean, are you a fan of Maneskin? Did you like what was happening with them this year?
The music isn't for me, but I get what they're doing, and I see where they're going. And the funny thing is, at Lollapalooza, when I saw them play, they had a gigantic crowd, and it was just it felt like a throwback to a different era. And then seeing them after the set was funny. Well, not funny, not like ha funny, but it was like, they were roaming around in like the back area, and the singer had his arm in a sling. So it's like, what happened here that all of a sudden that you were, going crazy on stage, and then I don't know, like an hour later you're like bandaged up. There is no explanation as to why.
Strange. Well, when they come on the show, I'll have to ask them about that for sure, because I think they'll be coming up soon. But it is interesting. I mean, they have a new record coming out, I think, around January 20th, Rush. They just did a song with Tom Morello that's dropping soon, Gossip. But, when I went to see them play, and we'll talk about some of our favorite gigs, actually, this past year, I mean, most of their songs that are great are not their own songs. So it is interesting now that they're releasing a lot of singles.
The pressure's on.
The pressure's on to have a great year. We'll see what next year holds for them. I'm excited to see 2023 for them. I do think they're going to have a big year, and I love the fact that if you think about Italian rock bands, there has never been an Italian rock band that I can remember ever to really break through in America.
No, not to this scale, definitely not. But I think a lot of that has to do with TikTok, because I think summer of 2021 is when they really caught on, and it's like they let the door open, and they smashed through it and ran out. And
and early on they were doing collabs with Iggy, who I just saw play the other day, and we'll get into that whole thing. I mean, let's talk about another band I think that had a pretty big year that I didn't know actually up until this year, Wet Leg.
Oh yeah,
great record. And it's real fun. It's fun pop. I mean, some great songs on the record. Wet Dream, Chase Lounge. It will definitely go into my top 5 songs of the year.
They dominated South by too. They were kind of the most buzzed about band, and they had lines all over the place. And that's when when you see boots on the ground like that and lines like that at an event like South by, where they're everywhere and there's still big lines, there's some legit buzz around it, despite what all the naysayers may say.
Yeah, they kind of came out of nowhere, right? I mean, what is the history of that band? Because actually, to be honest with you, I didn't really know where they came from.
Out of nowhere. There are two of them put together an album, and then I think they put together a secret SoundCloud that went to a manager, that went to a label, and bada bing, bada boom, and
happened so quickly. It is fascinating how quickly things can happen now in music, right? Between SoundCloud and the way that people discover music. There are artists that come out of the blue. Years ago, bands had to, they were slugging it in the clubs. It could take years, and now it's like within a month, the band is like buzzing all over.
Well, this was a private SoundCloud, so no one knows. But that's why they have their naysayers and their supporters, like every band. But I think divisiveness is good, because it leads to a polarizing group, which I think there needs to be more of that instead of everyone on one side or everyone on the other side. Or I do think everyone should be on, not of the same groupthink, but of an opinion. And they've certainly evoked opinions in 2022.
Definitely. Well, I assume
And it's a fun album.
It's a fun album. I mean, it's feel good music. Everybody loves a feel good song and feel good music. One of our other favorite bands that I know we both appreciate, the Chili Peppers, they had a great year too. Frusciante back in the band. I don't think anyone expected we'd get more than one album. We got 2 albums this year. I actually would have preferred this to be just one album instead of like 40 songs and like 8 great songs. But I still think, again, it's great to hear him back in the band. Definitely loved a bunch of the songs in this record. I think Eddie is a great song, the tribute to Eddie Van Halen. And it's just great to hear Frusciante back in the band. He's such a signature sound for that band, and it always works. And we saw them play, I think, at the Fonda not long ago. A great show, one of my favorite gigs this year. Did you like the records? 2 records?
Not really.
Not really? Okay.
I like this. I like Black Summer.
Yeah.
That felt vintage Chili Peppers.
It did.
It felt it had that, that extra, fire to it. And it just felt like if that was the direction that they were going in on those albums, it was like, holy shit, this is going to be a gigantic record. Then it kind of just, went away. And then the second one came out and kind of was just there. But you know what? It's a vehicle to tour these days, right? Isn't that what's most important?
Definitely.
And they played their biggest shows in the States today. They were playing football stadiums.
Amazing. And then I think next year it's them and Iggy Pop and the Strokes and Thundercat.
Amazing.
It's a great lineup for sure. Well, that was a great gig. I will say that the Fonda gig, I think, was their first gig back with Frusciante, and an incredible gig.
Great energy.
Great energy for sure. Another artist this year that had a great year, Andrew Watt. My buddy actually did the record. He's actually in a lot of this list this year because he actually did the Ozzy record, which we'll speak about too. But Eddie Vedder, and I feel like you're a big fan of Eddie Vedder. I think knowing that you're a big Pearl Jam fan, I think that you like this record.
I did. It was definitely split into 2 different sides, a side A and a side B, in terms of vibe and tenor of where things were. I mean, Invincible is one of the best songs he's done, and it feels very much like a Peter Gabriel song.
Yeah.
And then it goes in, then just goes into different, rock, the eras of rock you feel like you're going through. Like the single Long Way feels like a Tom Petty song. It has Ben Montench on it. Then you go on to the other side, there's like faster, upbeat songs. I think Eddie at the listening party said he wanted it to feel like one of his live shows. And that's how he sequenced the album the way he did, which I thought was really interesting. And he had Stevie Wonder and like Elton John on it.
Yeah. Brother of the Cloud for me was one of the best songs. And that
feels
feels
like
like
emotional song.
It is, and it feels like a Pearl Jam song. That song could have fit easily on any great Pearl Jam record. But another great record, and again, another year for my friend Andrew Watt. He seems to be the go-to guy for taking artists. I know that he just did the Iggy Pop record, which they've been dropping some singles on. And so he's the guy. I mean, this is another record I love that he did this year, Ozzy's new record, which had Tony Iommi on it. It had obviously Zakk Wylde on it, Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck. And it's unfortunate. I feel like Ozzy may not be able to tour this record next year from everything we hear.
Is he? I thought they had the No More Tours 2 dates still up there. Is that not a thing anymore?
He just has a lot of complications with the surgery he just had. And so apparently, I think the dates for next year are in question. But a great record. And again, a signature Andrew Watt. Mike McCready's on the record too. Some great songs on the record. I personally love the Zakk Wylde track, Parasite. But all in all, again, I feel like some of Ozzy's better work. Obviously, I love Ozzy's time in Sabbath, but good record.
It's been in the past 2 albums he's done with Watt have been great.
Definitely.
It's a shame that COVID happened and his health issues happened, because imagine hearing these songs on the road. Like everything about it, just all-star band, great writing, great production. It would have been Ozzy's latest chapter of rebirth.
Yeah, definitely. And it was great to see him on stage with Iommi this year earlier. So that was, I think he did one of the World Games, or it wasn't FIFA. It was he did a gig with Iommi in London earlier this year at a sporting event, and it was great to see them reunited on stage. Another record this year that I thought was a great record, Tears for Fears, The Tipping Point. I don't know if you got into this record. I really like this record. One of their stronger records, I think, to date.
One of our editors was a big fan of it. I haven't listened to it.
It's definitely a good record. Heavy Beatles influence. My Demons is a track that I really like. And another record we can get into, Elvis Costello had a great year. I think this is a record that a lot of people liked. Again, it's like vintage Costello. He actually did this record live too. It came out live at Memphis.
That is missing these days. I feel like there needs to be more of that, because again, it goes back to the recording and the warmth and like the, authenticity of what a sound should sound like, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And a strong record. I will say, I'm a huge Elvis Costello fan. I love his early records, and it was great to see him back in fine form. So another record we were just chatting about briefly, Big Thief, another record that's on everyone's list. I personally, I can't really get into this record that much, but I know everyone seems to love it. Wanted to get your take on it.
It has a very upstate New York vibe to it. It's like but
what is that exactly? That's,
it's like if you're going to like the Catskills in September, October, the leaves are falling off,
right.
and you're walking through the woods. That's what it feels like. That's what you put on your phone or put on whatever you listen to, and that's your soundtrack.
A little bit Dylan-esque.
Yeah, very much so. And the lyrics are really good too.
Yeah. But this did not make your top 5 or top 10 list.
It did not.
Although, oddly enough, because we were just chatting about it before, there's these lists that I guess, everyone, all the critics sort of get into and they vote on their favorite records. And this is a record that seemed to end up on everyone's list. Now, to be quite frank, I hadn't heard about it before. But for some reason, this is a record that really resonated with a lot of the critics.
Yeah, I mean, their Big Thief has long been a favorite of the music critic world. And this time it's funny because a few people sprouted up when the album was released in February and said, "Don't hate me if I don't like this album," which I just rolled my eyes. It's just like, you shouldn't have to apologize for not liking something. You either do or you don't, and you don't have to apologize for how you feel.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to get into your favorites too, but it's interesting. You know that I always lean a little bit towards the rock side of things. So there are a few records on this list that are not exactly rock and roll, but some of my favorite records for sure. I think that we agree on some of them. I think The Smile is a band that everyone can agree upon.
Yeah, We Don't Know What Tomorrow Brings is just, a great song. There's no way to split it up. That's just a great song. And on this tour, they've been playing new material that isn't on that album. So
Amazing.
I'm very curious to see what that means for them moving forward.
For those of you who don't know The Smile, it's actually Tom York from Radiohead, Johnny Greenwood, and it really is, for me, some of it sounds like early Radiohead, which is why I love it, because I feel like at some point, Tom York with his solo stuff, it kind of took a turn towards electronica.
But that's the beauty about them, though, is that they're not afraid to experiment and go with how they feel instead of feeling locked into a box.
That's true.
They're just going to do what they want, make really good music, and you're going to go along for the ride, and it's going to be great. They've earned trust after 30 years, I think.
They have. Although I love Pablo Honey. So I don't mind comparisons to early Radiohead, and Nigel Godrich is on this record, produced the record, and so yeah, definitely on everyone's top list this year. Great record. I haven't seen them live. Have you seen them live this year yet?
No, they're playing here next week.
Amazing. So
closing out their tour.
Maybe that's a
shrine.
If you're not on the East Coast, maybe that's something we need to attend together.
I'm gonna be on the Far East Coast, but
all right. Well, the Far East, I won't be there. But another record this year, which I love, actually the single, which I really love, one of my favorite songs this year, "Everything Electric," Liam Gallagher, Oasis. For me, the one band that needs to reunite. That
never gonna happen.
Never gonna happen. But even for $100 million,
never gonna happen.
But Dave Grohl played on this track. It's an epic track. It's again sounds like vintage Oasis, and the rocking side of Oasis.
Well, Liam knows what works for him.
He does.
He's not afraid to stick to it. The tried and true method. His brother's very different. His brother will kind of experiment a bit more, but Liam knows what works. He gives the people what they want, and that, that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing, and good on him for knowing,
Yeah, because there are a couple of albums that he was kind of experimenting. BDI was a band for me that never really worked. But this record
Well, that was Oasis without Noel. That's
right,
why
exactly.
it didn't work.
Yeah. But this record in particular really works for me in this single, and obviously having Dave Grohl on it didn't hurt. So it's just a great track.
Greg Kurstin produce it too?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. So that's another great album. I think if we're going to talk about, I think everyone in the world probably agrees, one of the biggest artists this year and having, the biggest year ever, Harry Styles. So there's no way to avoid Harry Styles. But, I'm a rock guy and I still appreciate Harry Styles. I think he made a great record. Is it the album of the year? Is he the artist of the year? Who knows?
Well, it depends by your metric and standard, too.
That's true. But I will say, As It Was is a really catchy song. I think the record's great. I mean, listen, his first couple records to me, they're referencing Bowie, so I never mind an artist that referenced Bowie.
But my only issue with him is that he's trying to be Bowie instead of trying to be his own person.
That's true. But he is talented.
There's no doubt about that.
We can't deny, I think, what did he do? He did like 27 nights at Madison Square Garden. I mean,
I thought it was 15, 15, and 15 is how he's splitting it up. But he's had some really great openers, too, which speaks to his knowledge as a musician. musician. Either that or he has just a great booking agent.
Yeah,
But
apparently the screams are so loud when you go to see him play that you can't even hear him singing because
at Coachella, it was an
it's
absolute circus. There had to be at least 100,000 of the 100 and something thousand people there, just there for him. So I feel bad for whoever went up against him that night.
amazing. Well, either way, he had a huge year.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we talk about certain trends that are happening this year, obviously Rosalia had a huge year.
Fantastic album. Fantastic album. A great mix of sound, and she is the future.
She is. I mean, I love the fact that she's sort of defying genres. I mean, she did a great track with The Weeknd on this record. And if you look at her year and you look at an artist like Bad Bunny, probably the biggest artist this entire year, that's definitely a trend that's been happening in music. I mean, you never would have an artist that would be the top artist in the world, that was a Spanish artist. And this year it happened with Bad Bunny.
Oh, for sure. And much deserved, because that guy is, talk about a star.
Yeah.
Selling out Yankee Stadium and SoFi a few nights. Like, that's as big as it gets.
No question. So talking about the Rosalia record, any tracks on it particularly that you fell in love with?
I was just a fan of just the total vibe of it, because everything kind of fit together, locked in like a puzzle.
Yeah.
And it kind of, everything flowed together seamless. So I kind of am a fan of the whole thing, the way it was a cohesive body of work.
Definitely. Well, if there's another trend that's happening in music, I think you guys actually put Willow on the cover this year. So I feel like maybe there's a return to rock and roll. I love the fact that she's authentic. She's a real artist.
Very much so.
I mean, it's funny. I was listening to an interview with her the other day, Dane, where she was referencing like Primus, which is not a band that I would think someone of her age would really enjoy.
But she's really knowledgeable about rock.
She is, which I love, and she's the real deal. She's a real artist. I mean, even Demi Lovato this year made a rock record, and some people seem to like it. I didn't particularly get into that, but if there's any trend towards rock, whether it be Demi Lovato, Willow Smith, whatever it may be, I'm all for it.
There's definitely an opening in the mainstream element of it, because the indie and underground rock have, contrary to what many people believe, hasn't gone away.
Not at all.
Maybe in the top 40 rock and things like that, yeah, sure, it's not what it was, but rock is still around, and whenever people say rock is dead, it's like you're just not looking.
Definitely. And if we talk about rock bands that really had a great year this year, we can't not talk about the band that we just interviewed the other day, Palaye Royale. The
Great
brothers
album.
in Palaye Royale. Yeah, great album.
Fun guys, they have a vision, they have an aesthetic, and that's a big part of it. And people want something like that.
Exactly.
They want to be led somewhere, and these guys, they're the real deal.
I feel like they could be this generation's My Chem Romance.
Absolutely.
And they look great. The record's great. No Love in LA, great track. So if you haven't checked out that record, make sure you check it out. Let's not forget Smashing Pumpkins this year, one of my favorite gigs this year, which we'll get into, but a great single with Beguided. I actually saw them at the Hollywood Bowl not long ago with Jane's Addiction.
How cold were you?
I was pretty cold. I feel like that was maybe the last night of the bowl. And it was, people don't realize that like when you're at the bowl now and it's like 35, 40 degrees at night, it's not that fun. And I actually prefer to see a band inside when you're like freezing. So I love the gig, but I actually love the gig.
Well, at least you weren't like Morrissey when he left the stage after 9 songs.
That's
so
true.
It could be worse.
Well, I did get to see the Pumpkins in New York at Irving Plaza, which was a stellar gig, and that felt very intimate. And the lineup is back, so it's great to see the band back in fine form. Jimmy Chamberlin, James Iha, great record. They have a new record out now, Atom Act 1. I assume there's an Act 2 coming out.
Yeah, isn't this their big 33 song album?
Yeah, that's what I hear. That's what I hear, and it is a great record. So if you haven't checked it out, check it out. Another band, honorable mention, one of my favorite bands, Royal Blood. There's no way I can.
Can't go wrong.
Can't go wrong. But again, I can't talk about the fact that they just released a single. So Honey Brains was one of my favorite songs of the year, but they did not release a full-length record. So
that means something's on the way then.
Yes, but you're a fan of Royal Blood? Yeah, for sure.
Great, heavy, loud band.
Exactly.
What more can you ask for?
That's true. And probably my favorite song of this year is Cracker Island, the Gorillaz with Thundercat. They also did a great song with Tame Impala. So it's definitely, I don't know, there's something happening with the Gorillaz. They're still relevant.
They have an album coming out next year.
They do. And they're releasing all kinds of music. They're dropping some singles, and the singles are great. At the end of the day, I actually thought this was the catchiest song of the year. I don't know if you checked out Cracker Island, but I love the track.
I mean, like it's the Gorillaz, you know. They everything's gonna be like that. Damon still knows how to write a great song, and very curious to see what they have coming up on this album.
I feel like it's going to be a stellar year for them next year. Let's talk about your favorite records this year, because I feel like there's a lot of records on this list that, to be frank with you, I wasn't really aware of. But even the artists that you put on the cover recently, the artist of the year.
Weyes Blood?
Why is Blood? Artist of the Year. Let's talk about it.
Great album. She's been around for a little bit, but a bit, and she's the real deal. The songwriting, the musicianship, the total package. She is it, and I think she's long been a favorite of music critics, but I think she's about to go into the mainstream. She's playing really good theaters. It's packing them out. There's a reason why she's Artist of the Year, and if you aren't familiar with her, I implore you to dive in. And The Darkness, Hearts Aglow it's just a great album. It's just what you want. It's an album that kind of fits every mood, and that's the sign of great music.
Well, I will say, and to give you a lot of credit here, last year you turned me on to Turnstile, which had already been around for some time, but I didn't actually know Turnstile, and I feel like this was also their year.
Oh, yeah. Turnstile, I think they blew up this year. I think it's safe to say that, right?
Yeah. I mean, there was a gig at the Palladium. There was
completely sold out. A bunch of big musicians were there looking on, and established musicians. So that's when you know that there's not just buzz, but there's legit interest from the music community at large.
Well, at the end of the day, they have great songs, and it's like hardcore, but with great songs. So, it's all about the song and the songwriting. So I actually saw them play at Ain't No Picnic with the Strokes, and another fantastic performance that we'll get into. But let's talk about some of your other favorite records this year.
I love Jack White's Entering Heaven Alive. That was the second of his two albums. The Fear the Dawn, the first one, I actually wrote a cover story on in March, and that was the one that seemed to get a lot of the press. And something he commented to me about is like, I bet the first one is always the one that gets all the press, but I'm releasing two, and usually when there's a second one, it's like you're kind of skeptical about what's going to happen. But the second one, and Entering Heaven Alive was just unbelievable. It's Jack at his is stripped down, and just fantastic songwriting. It's just, very sparse, very quiet. He wrote it in Michigan on a piano. It's very delicate. And it to many, including myself, it was very much a vintage, like, White Stripes type of album.
Well, let's talk about it. We're going to talk about some of our favorite interviews this year. You went to interview Jack White. How did it go? He's kind of a reclusive guy, right?
Yeah,
He's
we hit it off, though.
But a guy that a lot of people don't get to know, and you feel like there's this big mystery around Jack White. So what was your experience?
He's just misunderstood. That's what it is. He's a guy who loves music.
Yeah.
And he loves baseball. I mean, and he loves, upholstery. He's just a regular guy. You just got to, get... At his core, he's just a regular guy who loves music, like, a lot.
So the key was go in there and talk about upholstery for an hour, and then
we didn't
win him over.
No, we just talked about music, and that's the common ground. And he really knows what he likes. He knows a lot about the history, and he's a guy who takes great care and pride in how things are presented. He has a very particular vision. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Did you visit Third Band?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
It was awesome.
I went there once. They had a booth where you could record your own single. I did that. I don't know why I did it, but I felt like, what else is there to do when you go in there? But a great label, obviously an icon, great record. So what are some of your other favorite records this year?
Other favorite records. I liked Blue Rev by Elvis, that the Canadian band, back for the first time in quite a few years. And it was a big critical favorite. Biba Doobie's Beatopia. She's great. Have you heard her?
Cool. I have heard her, yeah. I had not heard her before your list, but I checked her out.
She is, she's very young. She's of the TikTok generation, but has that 90s sensibility.
Yeah.
And it's authentic, and it's done really well.
So a lot of artists like Pink Panthers I discovered last year because of your list, and this year we'll put up these lists too for everyone to check out.
Yeah, otherwise, I'm just going through a couple of my notes here. Wet Leg, where did we agree?
We talked about Wet Leg for sure.
And I like Kendrick Lamar's Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers.
Yeah.
It's very different than what people wanted or hoped from him, but it was interesting to me because it was an artist grappling with what they want and where they want to be. And it was just hearing him discuss that through his lyrics was just really interesting.
Yeah, another artist that had a great year, Ethel Cain.
Oh, yeah.
Ethel had a stellar year. I want to talk about Ethel a little bit. She's on everyone's list, too. Fan of Ethel Cain?
Not as familiar with her as I should be.
But she's definitely had a great year. An artist to watch. Some honorable mentions along the way. Steve Lacy.
I mean, biggest song of the year.
Yeah.
The Bad Habit was literally everywhere. It topped like 4 or 5 charts at one time.
No question.
Never done, I don't think, in history.
Yeah, and I feel like we're also forgetting some other artists there. So there's probably a few others on your list here that we didn't get into.
I like Gang of Youths. I think you would really love that album.
We talked about that, yeah. And I did check it out, so I need to spend more time on that record.
It's a really deeply personal album, and I highly recommend that to anyone listening. Is Angel in Real Time is going to really tug at your heartstrings.
Yeah, so I will definitely be checking that out. A couple of bands that we did not mention, the 1975, Fontaine's DC, another few bands I thought that had pretty good years this year.
Fontaine's DC is a good band.
Yeah.
1975, it's getting very shticky for my liking.
Right. You mean eating raw meat on stage is not shticky? It's shticky.
Exactly. It's just it's getting to like, dude, like what are we doing here?
So we'll get into that. Talking about favorite interviews, right? We
Yes.
want to move along just for a minute here because we were going to talk about some of our favorite interviews. So Jack White, I'm assuming, was one of your favorite interviews.
I mean, going down to Nashville, it was the story behind that. I was actually at the Innings Fest and the day before. Came back here for a day, took a red eye down to Nashville. Was in Nashville all day, took 6 a.m. flight back here. So it kind of adds the travel nuts and bolts, which I'm sure for everyone listening, who cares? But just being in it like that, there felt like there was a magic going on being able to swing it like that and spend like 4 or 5 hours with Jack and kind of get a sense of who he is.
Must have been great. I feel like I'm part of your extended family, and I don't even know when you're doing these interviews. I don't ever know who's on the covers. I just get,
we keep it close to the hip.
You do. So.
But Taking Me Back was one of the best songs of the year.
Yeah, great song, great track. Were there other people that you interviewed this year that you're really excited about?
I don't know if you saw it, but I just interviewed Tim Comerford from Rage Against the Machine.
I did, and he talked about having cancer.
Yeah, that was a tough one, but it was one of those that didn't see that coming. I tried to speak with him about, or initially the thought was, we'll speak about his new project, 70. Maybe we'll get into some Rage stuff, and kind of that be that. And then he told me that, and I for the first time during an interview, I was speechless. I mean,
what do you say?
What do you say? And it's just, especially when someone is so willing to trust you and to open up in a way that he did, it was just something that meant a lot to me to be able to tell a story and treat it as delicately and as, with the care that it deserved.
Yeah, I always find the best interviews are when people are vulnerable. And I was talking to you a little bit about Richard Patrick from Filter. We had a great interview, one of my favorite interviews this year. I feel like it's at about 2 million views now on social media. But, some of these stories have been told before. The story about him going to Trent Reznor, the manager, and saying, hey, I want to get some writing credit. You're living in the mansion. I'm living with my parents. And them saying, hey, we know this great job at this pizza place down the street. Maybe you should be a delivery boy. And so people seem to really take to that. I definitely felt like that was one of my favorite interviews this year, as well as Ian Astbury from The Cult, who doesn't really do a lot of press.
No, very, very reclusive.
Yeah, him and I are friends, and so I always value those friendships, and I feel like that was definitely great for me, as well as, I made a new friend in Matt Pinfield this year. We really hit it off. You and I have spent some time with him. Great guy. I think the Palaye Royale interview we did was great.
I was going to put that on there, too.
Definitely. Such a fun interview. Great guys, and people seem to really take to that, as well as Simon Le Bon and I would say Yungblud were both really fun interviews for me this year.
Which was your bucket list one? Was there anything this year that was kind of like, I'm glad I got this one?
God, I feel like I have bucket list ones all the time. I have not hit them. I mean, if I had a real bucket list, it would be Larry David. So
there you go.
There's a bucket list.
LD, you listening out there?
For some reason, Larry David does podcasts about sports, and I feel like he does baseball podcasts sometimes. And that would go to you because I know nothing about baseball, if I'm going to be honest. So I feel like I really
better brush up.
Yeah, for that interview, I would for sure. But any other interviews that really stood out for you this year?
I'm trying to think because, as we were discussing earlier, this whole year feels like a time warp. Like up is down, down is up. Like a month was a day was a year. And I spoke with Dave Grohl or very early in the year about Studio 666, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun diving into that movie and kind of going over what they were up to at the time before everything changed. And
By the way, the nicest guy in rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
And it is true. I mean, when you meet Dave, and I met him before and hung out with him, he really is that genuine. And it's interesting. I think people that what they see with him is truly who he is. I mean, he's no different, off stage and on stage. When I met him, he was barbecuing for about 150 people. He put his arm around me and we started chatting. And incredible to see that kind of success. Obviously, he had a really, really tough year.
Mm-hmm.
Our condolences go out to Taylor's family, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But still, there must have been a great time hanging out with him pre everything happening.
Oh, that was
right?
over. It was over Zoom, and it was one of those Zooms that flew by because sometimes on Zoom it could be like tedious, and you're like, okay, how much time do I have? But that one was like, wow, that was 45 minutes. Holy shit!
By the way, another guy who really loves music and a music historian. So I'm sure anything you referenced,
Well, it was funny. He was working on the album that was to be the soundtrack of the band that was murdered in the movie.
Oh,
and
right.
he's like, you want to hear it? And he turned it up really loud on Zoom. He said, I haven't played this yet. And it was just like, over the Zoom speakers. It's like, what are you
couldn't really
doing? You could barely hear it. And,
Right.
But it was like, okay, I see where you're going with this. And
Yeah.
it was ended up, it was released on Black Friday for Record Store Day, but it was a bit more somber with all that happened.
Definitely. Well, that I'm sure was your bucket list this year. Any bucket list items this year for you that you checked off? Jack White, I guess.
I mean,
maybe?
going to Nashville, I always love going to Nashville, but
Yeah.
going into, being in Third Man and being just treated really well and getting to know those people, the great people who worked there, was definitely a highlight because they're real fans of music and they really know their stuff and they're very friendly. So it always makes things a lot easier.
Yeah, I got to hang out with Patrick Carney the other day and we were chatting drums. And I know that you interviewed them not long ago. So how was that interview for you, the Black Keys?
That was fun. My in-laws are from Northeast Ohio, so there was a lot of inside Northeast Ohio talk going on there.
That's cool.
In one of the videos we did, I asked them through one of our news writers, Jonathan Kohn, about basically what is your favorite hamburger joint in Akron, and they gave one of the most puzzled looks when he's like, how do you know that? And that's actually a damn good question.
Well, another great interview. So congrats on that interview. I guess if we had to talk about the biggest years for artists this year, I mean, I'm going to throw out a handful of names here. I would say Rosalia, Harry Styles. I feel like Jack White.
What about The Weeknd?
The Weeknd, Jack White, Bad Bunny had a great year, obviously. So, those are, and on the rock side, like I said, I think Maneskin had a really great year. But any other artists that we're not talking about that should be mentioned?
I would have said Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, up until...
I think about what they were doing before Zach got injured.
That's true.
Even when Zach was injured, they were playing arenas all over the country.
It's funny talking about Rage. I mean, definitely one of my favorite gigs this year. I got to see them.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
I mean, it was such a great show at Madison Square Garden.
Uh-huh.
It's actually when he injured his leg, so he was sitting down, the majority of the show, but it was still such a great show. And the energy in that room. I mean, I saw Billy Joel there, and we spoke briefly about it the other day. When
Not a fan.
I felt like I was at like dinner theater. Everyone was in their seats. Nobody was moving. Nobody
Supper
was
club.
standing. Yeah. And from that to like Rage Against the Machine, where the entire audience was energized, and it was this kinetic
And
energy.
just think that those songs are 23 years old.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Definitely. But Rage, incredible show. One of my favorite shows this year. Let's get into it. What were some of your favorite shows this year?
By far and away, it was the Taylor Hawkins tribute at the Forum. That just the emotion and the heavy hearts and just the pride that all the artists took in performing for him, and just feeling how beloved he was among them. It was a real special night, and it was great to be there and to just see what was going on and being a part of it as the audience. It was, you got to see collaborations you'd never expect to see.
Yeah.
Like Josh Homme playing Cars songs.
Amazing.
Them Crooked Vultures, and then, basically Dave Grohl playing Michael Anthony with Wolfgang Van Halen playing his father, and Justin Hawkins, David Lee Roth, and Josh Freese, Alex Van Halen, and having it sound like Van Halen was incredible.
I got to say, Justin Hawkins really surprised me this year. I'm a big fan of his YouTube show, which we'll get into, but those performances were incredible. I actually ran into Luke from the Struts last night. I'm going to see him perform tonight. He's playing with Mark Garson. He's doing some Bowie songs, and so he played with at the Taylor Hawkins tribute in London with Queen, and that was incredible just to see them perform.
It was a treat. That both shows were just they were well done. Done with all the right spirit and with great intentions, and there's nothing more you could say. It everything about it was just done for the right reasons.
Yeah, I was jealous. I mean, the timing didn't work out for me on either one of those shows, but great shows. I watched both of them. I was there in spirit. I think some of my other favorite shows this year, Iggy, I just saw play.
Yeah, when did you see Iggy?
So Iggy played at the Celine show the other day. It was actually, I feel like it was a tribute to Meet Me in the Bathroom. It was The Strokes, Interpol, The Kills, which some of those bands are not part of that film, and Iggy. And so Iggy, one of the greatest singers ever, one of my icons. I mean, I feel like, I love Iggy and he's incredible. It is a little bit hard to see when he's limping and he's not in the form he was in 10 years ago, but he's still one of the greatest singers of all time.
Have you heard the album?
I've heard a little bit of it, and
How
I
is
like
it?
it. I like it. I've heard 2 songs so far, but I know it's Chad Smith is on it. I think Duff. It's Andrew Watt's usual suspects of the guys that he hires to do his record. So a couple of the songs I've heard I loved, and he's still great. I mean, he still sings great. Definitely one of my favorite shows, and a very cool show. I mean, I didn't know going into the Celine show every band would play full sets. So
how long was that show?
It started at 8 and ended at like 1 or 2 in the morning, but it was great. So definitely one of my highlights. We talked a little bit about the Pumpkins. I saw them play at Irving Plaza.
So which was better, Irving Plaza or the Bowl?
Well, for me, it was Irving Plaza just because it was an intimate performance. I wasn't freezing, and I got to see. I was standing right above, so I got to watch Jimmy Chamberlain. I'm a drummer, so I geek out on watching amazing drummers all night long. So that was great. I feel like the Chili Peppers gig that we went to, the Fonda. Definitely one of the best shows I went to this year, and 100%. I got invited to this Billy Joe Armstrong gig earlier in the year. That was like his birthday. I thought it was a Green Day gig. I got there, and
where was it?
It was at Desert 5, which actually you came to see me play there and the Struts perform when I had my birthday there. But what an incredible show! I mean, this whole band showed up. It was like every legend in the building, and it was for like 30 people. So that was definitely one of the highlights of my life. Billy Joe, Green Day at Desert 5, amazing show. An honorable mention, I would say, goes out to Maneskin. I went to a private show they did for Amex. Amex does those sort of like those, amazing large bands in small venues. And I got to see Maneskin play in a very small venue in New York. Another great show. And I think last but not least, Turnstile. And we just mentioned Turnstile, This Ain't No Picnic with the Strokes. Another great festival. By the way, I'm forgetting Failure, who is a band we both really like downtown. And I think last but not least, the Palaye Royale show I saw at the Palladium that I wanted you to come to is definitely the best show that I've seen them do. So I know, oddly enough, you're not really a TV and film guy.
No, I'm a big. I'm very. I like to say that I know a lot about a little.
Right. So your favorite show, we talked a little bit about.
Better Call Saul. The way it ended was, spoiler alert, was just bittersweet, but it was the perfect way for Gilligan and Gould to close out that show, because you wanted it to feel like the path you were on meant something, and the way it kind of jumped around the last season, and kind of the way that was a really slow burn throughout the whole series to get to where you were, it just felt satisfying, and you don't get that most of the time with a series like that.
Yeah, interesting enough, you're not a TV guy, but that seems to be the only show that you're like obsessed with, right?
I know I know a lot about a little.
Well, if I could recommend some shows to you, my favorite shows this year, definitely White Lotus.
I've heard
season.
So many great. So what's the deal with White Lotus? Is it they shot the first one in Maui, right? And then this one's in Italy? Or?
Yeah, and every season someone gets killed. And
so is it like True Detective?
Not really, because it's like, it's
different casts.
Yeah, White Lotus is this amazing resort. It's like always set at the White Lotus resorts. This one was set in Sicily. An incredible show. I think the entire world is buzzing around this show this year.
Except for me.
Except for you. It just finished. Jennifer Coolidge, Aubrey Plaza. Great show. Mike White created it. It's on HBO. If you haven't seen the second season, run to go see it. Because
what about the first season?
First season's great too. I'm just assuming anyone that's going to watch the second season probably saw the first season, but definitely one of the best shows this year, no question. Handful of other shows I really liked. I know this is primarily a music show, so I won't spend too much time talking about shows that are not music related. The Offer was a great show. It stars Miles Teller, Giovanna Ribisi, Connor Hanks. It's about the story of The Godfather, the making of The Godfather.
Yes, Paramount Plus, right?
Paramount Plus. It's funny. The story about the making of The Godfather is almost more interesting than The Godfather, one of the greatest.
How so?
Well, that movie almost didn't get made. The mafia got really involved. They didn't want it to be made. I mean, it's incredibly fascinating. So if you have a moment, highly recommended. It's a great movie. I mean, I didn't know anything about the making of The Godfather, but if you it's definitely worth spending a couple hours watching this. Another show that I really highly recommend this year, The Bear. I don't know if you watched it. Another movie that just
is about the cook, right?
It's about the cook. It's about a chef that comes home to Chicago to run his family sandwich shop. There's a death in
Oh,
the
so
family.
this is why there was all that beef craze or whatever.
Exactly. Jeremy Allen, A Star is Born. There was definitely some shows this year where sort of certain stars were born. I would say Aubrey Plaza was already doing well. White Lotus, Jennifer Coolidge, White Lotus. And for sure, this is the year of Jeremy White. Great show, The Bear. I also really love We Crash, Jared Leto. When I talk about music and I talk about actors, he's probably the only actor in the world that has made it successfully in a rock band. If you think about rock bands where there's a successful singer that's also a great actor, I can't really think about anyone else that's succeeded in both the way Jared Leto has.
What about Juliette Lewis?
She's done well. I love Juliette Lewis, but maybe not quite.
I need to give this some thought.
Yeah. Well, either way, We Crash was a great show.
Okay.
It's Jared Leto, Anne Hathaway. It's the story of the rise and fall of WeWork.
Got it.
A company that I actually worked out of for a couple years. So I'm very, very familiar with WeWork, from the $47 billion valuation to a very small evaluation. And it's a great, great story. I feel like a lot of the shows that I really embrace this year were sort of, based on real life circumstances.
I wonder if that's going to happen to Twitter and Tesla.
Oh my God, it's probably next. But we can't talk about that without talking about also Super Pumped, another great show about the story of Travis Kalanick, the CEO of Uber, was ultimately ousted. So again, I love documentaries. I feel like we probably both love documentaries. So a lot of these shows, again, based on real life. Another great show. If you haven't seen it, check out Super Pumped for sure. Another show on everyone's list, Severance. I don't know if you've seen Severance.
I've heard of it.
Well, Severance is also Adam Scott, who leads a team of office workers whose memories have been surgically divided between their work and their personal lives. So it's almost like watching an episode of Black Mirror. Definitely one of the most coveted shows this year. People seem to love the show. I got through most of it, but I can say it's incredible. It's a great, great show. Were you I don't know if you're a House of Dragons. So you're not a Game of Thrones fan.
That's above my brain capacity.
Okay. Well, if you haven't seen actually House of the Dragons, it's a great, great show. It's the prequel to Game of Thrones, one of the best shows this year. I mean, there are certain shows that I would run home to see if I was out, that being one of them. I mean, we all have the other. So I guess Better Call Saul was the only show that you would run to go home.
But I did watch other shows that are on your list.
You did? Okay. Well, so a few others that are on my list. Wednesday, Tim Burton. It's the story of the Addams Family and Nevermore Academy. Tim Burton is a genius. So either way you slice it. I mean, this show, I just started watching it. Jenna Ortega stars in this, but a great, great show. The genius of Tim Burton never ceases to amaze me. He's incredible. Definitely one of my favorite shows this year already, and I just started watching it. And I had to go back and sort of Google which shows came out this year, because when you think about shows that came out in January already, it feels like
it's a year ago.
Exactly.
Literally.
So another few shows just to touch base on in a moment. Dahmer was great.
I did see that.
Gave me nightmares. What about you?
It's tough to watch.
Tough to watch. I mean, the meat sandwich, I don't want to watch that. I feel like it was really hard to watch. But Ryan Murphy, another...
I mean, you know what you're getting with Ryan Murphy at this point.
But having incredible success. Really hard to watch, but I thought it was very well done. Euphoria. We can't not talk about TV and not talk about what
Euphoria.
A stellar year.
That show is... It's another one that it keeps getting better and better.
No question. I think Labyrinth is going to come on the show coming up. Actually, Billie Eilish brought him out about 2 days ago to her show. He does all the music for it. And I think Billie Eilish actually brought out Dave Grohl last night.
And Phoebe Bridgers.
That's right. So definitely, if you haven't, I mean, if you're sleeping under a rock and haven't seen Euphoria season 2, make sure you check it out.
It's one of the wildest shows on TV. I think it's safe to say that.
Definitely. Now, did you see Pam and Tommy this year?
No, I need to.
That's a great show. I will say Sebastian
wasn't it the biggest Halloween costume of the year?
Yeah, definitely. But, the casting on Pam and Tommy was so on point. Sebastian Stan, Lily James, about the infamous sex tape. What a great show. Again, heavy on a lot of my shows, heavy on music. I thought it was great. Very well done. And you forget, it was sort of really the first sex tape to come out many years ago. Not willingly, but the first one to really get released.
It was definitely a pioneer in that field.
It was. Another great show this year, Minx. I don't know if you saw Minx. It's about 1970s young feminist that joins forces with a low-rent publisher to create the first erotic magazine for women, sort of the first Playgirl. Great show, also on HBO. Highly recommended. And another show that, if you haven't seen it, The Dropout. You know the story of The Dropout, Elizabeth Holmes, Theranos?
Yes.
Who actually just got sentenced.
I was going to say, yeah. I know No, the real's the news story, not the show.
But a great show. Again, just another show highly recommended. I have not seen Yellowstone, but people seem to really buzz about it.
It's a very big. It has a very big following. Every Sunday night, it's like you go on social media. It's a Yellowstone this, a Yellowstone that, and it's just interesting that they have Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren as the 1923 stars, which is, I guess, a prequel to that.
It's funny because they come out with shows now. There's always like the prequel shows. So, but are you a film guy? Any great films you saw this year?
I haven't been to a movie theater in years.
Well, even on TV, these could be shows that you stream. I mean, all the streaming services seem to really.
I like to Meet Me in the Bathroom doc.
Yeah, let's talk about
recently.
that, by the way. Amazing footage. So if you haven't seen Meet Me in the Bathroom, it's about the story of LCD, The Strokes, New York, early 2000s, Interpol.
Yeah, it's a snapshot into a different time is probably the best way to describe it. And I don't think that time can exist in today, but I hope it does.
Yeah, I love watching the early like Karen O footage.
It was great. And whoever had the foresight to capture that, like, kudos.
It's funny because someone was saying to me there should be like a second version of that movie. I'm like, I'm sure whenever they were filming it, they didn't know that those artists would become as big as they were.
Exactly.
So how could there be a second? You know,
yeah,
there can't be a part two because no one someone had the wherewithal to film it, but I don't think they filmed it.
And it was probably on VHS.
Exactly.
Or did you see The Batman by any chance?
I did not.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know if it was because I saw it on a plane or whatnot, but I don't know.
Didn't do it for you. It is hard watching movies on a plane. Though. I don't really feel like...
even so, but they're the magic of the Christian Bale Batmans.
That's true.
There was just anything after like the Ben Affleck one. It's like, what are we trying to do here? And it was a 3-hour movie.
Wow. Some people really seem to like that film, but I guess it's a film that you didn't take to for whatever reason.
I get what they were doing, but I prefer Michael Keaton. And I prefer Christian Bale.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
Just not that there was anything wrong about what Pattinson did. It felt like the movie Seven very much, if that makes sense.
I didn't see it, but for sure at some point I will have to see it.
You've seen Seven, though, right?
Yeah, I've seen Seven, of course.
It was very much like that. It was always raining and dark and moody, which is cool.
Yeah.
But there had to be, I think at least an hour could have been cut off of it. But the way Christopher Nolan did it was just, action packed, and it was like you barely knew what you were going on, and it was this, that. This one had a lot going on, and it kind of bogged it down. But hey, what do I know? I'm not a film critic.
Right. Well, some other films which I really did like this year. I don't know if you saw the Elvis movie, Baz Luhrmann.
No, I wanted to see that. I see it's on HBO and it's streaming, so it's one I'm probably going to catch up on the next few days.
Highly recommended. Austin Butler's a star.
Yeah,
I think
that's what everyone says.
Just got nominated, so highly recommended. I don't know if you also saw Moon Age Daydream, the Bowie film. But Brett Morgan explores
I heard it was
Bowie.
great.
Great movie.
He always does great stuff, though.
Great stuff. More like an art film for me than actually a documentary. But again, the footage, it's all about the footage that people capture from back in the day. So highly recommended. A few other music-related things that I think if you haven't seen, the docuseries, My Life as a Rolling Stone.
I heard that was great.
Great. I mean, it's a 4-part series. They kind of focus on each member. You get to see Charlie and his artwork, and you get to really explore the characters of, that make up the Rolling Stones, a 60-year career. So you don't realize how long this band's been around, and they're
incredible.
They're still amazing. And I think again, it's a little bit hard to find. It's on Epix. It's one of these channels that a lot of people don't seem to really watch that much, but highly recommend.
I may be one of 8 people who subscribe to it. So
well, if you haven't seen it, check it out. I actually really like the John Waite documentary, The Hard Way. John Waite, if you don't know, singer for Bad English, The Babies early on, and a great documentary. Was done mostly during COVID, and again, you can see the bitterness and sort of his life, and a career that some may say really didn't hit the pinnacle of others, but I really thought it was well done, and not someone that I really focus on that much and think about John Waite's career, but I thought it was very well done.
Probably gave new appreciation and insight to it, though.
I feel like it did. I mean, I don't listen to Missing You that often, but I do listen to the Babies here and there. A great pop band from back in the day.
Absolutely.
So definitely a documentary. If you like documentaries, worth checking out. And last but not least, if you haven't seen Triangle of Sadness, it's a great film. It's a sort of satirical black black comedy. It's based on a model and an influencer and their sort of adventures on this luxury cruise.
I
what
can only
happens.
imagine.
It's great. In fact, it's kind of a sad thing, but I used to work many years ago with Charlie Dean, who's a star of this movie, and she actually tragically passed away earlier this year. I think we have been speaking about, it's been a crazy year with all the people that actually passed away. So I guess we can get into that a little bit.
Yeah, it's just been tough. You know, you never expect anyone, you know, I mean, death is always looming, but it's never, you know, something you anticipate happening. And there were a bunch of shockers this year, especially in the music world. I mean, Christine McVie a few weeks ago, right?
Yeah, what a shocker.
And then obviously Taylor, which, you know, rattled the entire music world to its core. And even Coolio. Coolio was only 59.
Crazy.
The legendary rapper.
Yeah,
So,
I remember years ago I sat next to Coolio on a plane, and he's like, you know, tell me about your upbringing. We started speaking. He's like, yeah, I used to like rob houses when I was a kid. I was like, oh, I didn't do that, but that was definitely.
I don't think the Roslyn police would like that very much, right?
That was well, that wasn't me. I wasn't robbing it. He was telling me about his.
I know.
Yeah, they wouldn't like that for sure. Or the Five Towns police. They
Yeah,
would
I
not
don't
like
think
that.
the Cedarhurst cops will take too kindly, or North Woodmere.
No, but that was one of my more memorable first class experiences. I don't really fly first class that often, but the one time, a couple of times I have, you know, my life, I
quite
sat
the
next to him.
upgrade.
Yeah, it was actually
a good one.
It was actually great. But let's talk about some other people tragically that passed away this year. There's definitely been. I mean, I think Taylor Hawkins definitely, you know, the most tragic thing this year for anyone. I feel good about the fact that the Foo Fighters are kind of getting back out there a little bit, and Dave's been performing a bunch lately. I feel like, you know, if I had to make a prediction for next year, they'll probably be back in action. I don't know how you feel about that, but
I don't know. I just hope, you know, I just hope for the best. You know, it's a big loss, and they're all those guys are close. So, you know, I just hope that you know, that they do right by themselves, you know?
No question.
And don't listen to the outside noise, and they still have a lot of great music left in them, I think.
So if we had to just say the wrap up for this year, Daniel, and your artists, we talked about artists to watch for next year. Are there any other artists to watch for next year that you really have your eye on? Again, you turned me on to Turnstile. They had a huge year this year.
I mean, I'm expecting big albums from big artists next year, and there were a lot of huge albums from artists from rising art. I mean, the beauty about music is you never know what's going to grab you. Like, no one would have expected this time 2 years ago that Turnstile would be, you know, the band.
Yeah.
So I don't want to make any predictions just yet because
we need your predictions. It's exactly what we're asking for.
I don't have my crystal ball in front of me though, so I'm going to hedge quite a bit.
Are there any albums that are slated for next year that you're really excited to hear? Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be the biggest albums next year, but just that you're really excited to hear.
I'm going to take the fifth because I know a bunch of stuff is in the pipeline, but I'm not sure if I'm of liberty to reveal what that may be.
All right. Well, or any
Gorillaz, I am actually interested to hear.
Yeah, for sure. Are there any tours that you're excited to see next year? I mean, I think the Chili Peppers tour with that incredible
That's not going
lineup.
to be here though. I don't think.
I feel like they're doing some shows
secondary
in States.
markets or tertiary markets.
Yeah, I'll fly somewhere and
there you
check
go.
that. Yeah.
I'm trying to think I mean, I'm not the world's biggest Taylor Swift fan, but I know a lot of people seem to be very excited about that.
Yeah, I guess we could talk about the whole Ticketmaster debacle.
Yeah, I mean, Pearl Jam predicted that in 1994, said it was happening, and no one listened. And now, all of a sudden,
that's true.
They were right.
They were right, for sure.
It's just a shame that fans are the ones who get, you know, the short end of the stick with these type of things.
Yeah, I will say 2022, an interesting year for music. I'm excited for 2023. I feel like we were just talking about it again right before we started with the pandemic. We lose track of space and time.
Oh my God.
And, you know, I'm Googling like everything to see which year, like I said, when things came out and when it didn't come out, because it still feels like we're pulling ourselves out of that time period. So I feel like by 2023, it's going to be a good year.
But and there were a lot of great small shows this year, and big. You went to the stadium tour to the Def Leppard Motley Crue one.
I did not go.
Really?
Surprisingly enough, yeah. I did introduce Nikki Sixx to his wife, but I didn't seem to get tickets for that show. So for whatever reason, I did not go. But I heard a lot of people had a lot of fun. I mean, I'm just happy that was one of the biggest.
It was a good nostalgia tour, but seeing like the Yeahs at the Teragram and Black Keys at the Troubadour. Even Third Eye Blind at the Troubadour. It was nice to be back in those intimate venues and seeing everyone regaining their footing.
Yeah, as we speak now, I believe that Metallica is doing like a secret show tonight. So, yeah, there's always
the benefit show, the charity show.
Yeah, there's something they're doing some show
downtown.
But there are a lot of bands that you're right that did these sort of like bigger bands and smaller venues, which I always love to see. And I feel like for sure it's going to be the year of a lot of surprises next year. So stay tuned, right?
Indeed. That's the joy of looking forward to 23.
Exactly. Well, I appreciate you
and
coming
Blink 182. How did we forget about that?
We forgot about they're going to have a massive year next year.
How could I feel dumb forgetting about that. That was a gigantic, reunion that was kind of in the works for about a year, but it finally got announced and people went nuts over that.
And it's funny. I was with a band last night, Beauty School Dropouts, that I don't know if it's Tom DeLonge or one of the Blink guys.
Was it Mark?
It might have been Mark that actually performed with them and did a song with them, Almost Famous, and a great track. And yeah, we were talking about it, just the fact that they're having such a huge year and they're going to have a really big 2023. So
yeah, that's a band to keep your eye on.
How do we forget about that?
I don't know. It's, the Linda's also had a big year.
That's true.
One of my favorite things we did is we set up them and Kathleen Hanna to talk.
Oh, that's cool. That's awesome.
And same with Taylor Momsen and Kim Thayil and Matt Cameron. So a lot of good stuff. And Japanese Breakfast had a big year. I mean, it was building off the momentum of last year, and it's just great. I'm more interested in seeing what comes of that, because who had the strong 22 and that could really carry it forward.
Well, every time I talk to you and we do these, I learn about new records that I don't know about. I discover new artists, so I appreciate it. It's great to have you here. It's really always fun.
Ah, blast. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited for next year, so we're going to do a lot of fun stuff together. Check it out, guys. Make sure you check out our list. They're going to go up on Spotify. Best of. I appreciate you tuning in. Have a great end of the year, and thanks for coming on.